Anthony Joshua, two-time heavyweight champion of the world, and I was completely wrong. I picked Andy Ruiz Jr. to win in the later stages of the fight. I thought his perceived stylistic advantages, his ability to push him back, to jab to the body and force him to open him up, I thought that was going to have the final say in a spirited effort from AJ. What I saw from AJ was more than I thought he was going to produce. He kind of evolved before my very eyes. We saw much better footwork being the key thing. We saw a varied left hand. We saw an ability to clinch. We saw all those things I needed to see in order for him to win, and that is exactly what he did. Now, one thing I didn't mention in my prediction video was the prospect of, if AJ won, it's ultimately better for the division, and that's precisely right. Had Ruiz won a second time, fights against Fury and Wilder, definitely big fights, but nowhere near as big now as prospective fights between AJ Wilder or AJ Fury, because he was the guy who's supposed to be right at the top with them. He is now again. Similar dimensions. He's got history with both of them in terms of just being matched with them for so many years, in terms of the potential of it. So it just is ultimately better for the division. Now, in terms of his performance, that footwork was really on point. You go back to June 1st, AJ is being pushed back awkwardly like a wobbling tree. He doesn't know what to do. He's changing his posture all the time. Before the knockdown, he didn't really know how to fully get to grips with Ruiz. This time he kept his shape. He kept taking little steps back. He was changing the angle of which way he was circling. He was making sure he wasn't staying on the ropes. He was clinching when he needed to, and there was a moment of relief for AJ, almost I think in the 7th round, when he realised that, shit, this actually works. I'm clinching him and it's shutting everything down. And at that moment he started sticking his tongue out. I think at that moment AJ realised, I can really win this fight, because he was playing such a good matador to the bull. And then we saw a creative lead hand as well, and that was even in his dressing room. There was like a command. There was like pages of an instruction booklet about how to deal with Ruiz prior to going out and facing him. One of them said creative lead hand. I knew that was one of the things we needed to see, and again, it's one of the things I didn't think he was capable of doing in such a short space of time. But we saw AJ there, the jab, half retracted, blinding him a little bit, and then boom, flicking it out, sometimes doubling it. He was punching in between the moments he usually does. It was confusing Ruiz, and he was getting off with some really clean punches. Of course, when you extend the left hand here, like Lennox Lewis used to do a lot, there's a lot less distance to travel from there and then there to the head, so it's just very hard to avoid. And if you go back, way back to Jack Johnson, the first heavyweight, black heavyweight champion of the world, he used to do the same thing, and he even wrote about it, speaking about the importance of the left hand and how it's like a rudder. It's like a rudder to a boat. It controls absolutely everything, and that is exactly what AJ managed to do. Now, it wasn't completely perfect. You can still see that AJ doesn't have like natural Larry Holmes rhythm. He was caught in between transitioning from the clinch out to outside boxing again a bit awkwardly. He was hit round the side. Sometimes Ruiz managed to anticipate what he was doing. And again, there was a bit of a panicky and a flustered look about him. But again, the amount of time he had, what he managed to produce, you've got to give him a massive thumbs up. Now Ruiz, the guy who I picked to win. Along with loads of people, it seemed like a lot of the boxing fans were picking Ruiz, whereas a lot of the casuals and the bookies picked AJ, which is, of course, what turned out to be right. He weighs in at 283.7 pounds. Now, I'm not giving myself any excuses. AJ won. He proved me wrong. He showed me what I needed to see, which I doubted I was going to see. But still, I was trying to then tweak my prediction. I was thinking, right, well, I did pick him to win late. Is he going for an early stoppage now, coming in so heavy? And I know George Foreman has said a lot in the past, and not everybody agrees with him. But as soon as Big George saw that weight, he just said, I can't believe this young man has thrown away this opportunity like that. That is just how old George saw it, who is, of course, still mentally very clear at 70. As soon as he saw Ruiz came in at such a weight, 20 stone, he just thought he'd thrown it away. And then to hear Ruiz say the first words out of his mouth, I haven't trained, I've been partying. It might be true, but to me, that just, more than anything else, whether he could have possibly beaten AJ if he was in better shape, it would have at least been a better fight, you would have thought. Regardless of any of that, it's just disrespectful to the sport. To admit that when you're getting paid more, it should be an incentive to do better, especially against the same opponent, to prove it wasn't a fluke. And yet he uses that time and he just gets in terrible shape. It also shows that unless you have tasted fame before, you do not know the effect it is going to create. All throughout, Ruiz said the right things in the build-up to the rematch, saying, nah, man, I'm fine, I'm training okay, I'm blessed, of course. I'm training well, I'm going to be even in better shape. He said he was going to be lighter. And then he just says, I've been eating the whole time, I haven't been training properly. It's just disrespectful to the sport completely. Game as anything, yes, he kept pushing, but as soon as he took off his top, he was more disgusting than usual. I could see those extra 15 or whatever they were pounds on his belly, and it was not a good look. You've got to give AJ the credit, though. You've got to say that even had Ruiz come in the best shape, that new boxing style that AJ showed with all those bolts that were tightened on the style, you'd have to say he would have won anyway. Now, there was a lot of comparisons with the upset of Mike Tyson by Buster Douglas back in the day when Ruiz pulled the trick over AJ back in June 1st. It wasn't as big an upset as that. It wasn't even as big as an upset for me as Rackman Lewis, because Joshua had shown weaknesses before. He'd shown he'd been weak, he'd been dropped, he'd gassed a bit, and he's always looked a bit hittable. So for me, the comparisons with Douglas and Tyson, they didn't really hold. But they didn't really hold in another way as well, and that is when Douglas beat Tyson, Tyson was the undisputed emperor of the heavyweight division. Anthony Joshua was just a unified champion. Now, I know you've got Tony Bellew now in full fanboy mode going, he's the best heavyweight, but all he's done, you could say, if you want to put it harshly, is beating a guy he should have beaten the first time around. If we are fortunate, we should be getting the rematch between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder in February of 2020. But we have got to see these top guys face each other. And from AJ's perspective, if we're lucky, considering how long everything takes to set up these dates and to actually make fights, I think we'll be lucky if we see AJ against just one of those guys next year.